Stop chasing the applause of people who do not even remember your face after they scroll away. While millions of people spend their lives performing existence through glowing screens, a different type of man is being built in silence. No audience, no announcement, no validation, just repetition, precision, control. The world calls him invisible right before it starts calling him unstoppable. Most people will never understand this because they have confused attention with value. They think visibility means importance. They think being watched means being respected. But attention is the cheapest currency in human history now. A stranger can gain millions of views for dancing beside chaos, humiliating themselves for algorithms, exposing private pain for temporary relevance, and still go to sleep feeling hollow. Because attention is not power. Attention is noise. And noise disappears the moment something louder arrives. That is the trap consuming modern ambition. You see it everywhere now. Men documenting goals instead of pursuing them. People announcing routines they have not yet earned. Public declarations replacing private discipline. Entire identities built around appearing productive instead of becoming dangerous through competence. The terrifying part is that the system rewards it temporarily. You can fake growth online longer than you can fake it in reality. That sentence alone separates two categories of people. The first category spends years crafting the image of transformation. The second spends years enduring transformation itself. Only one survives pressure. Only one becomes undeniable when life removes filters, captions, and editing. And somewhere deep inside yourself, you already know which category you belong to. That discomfort you feel right now is important. Do not escape it, because the modern world has trained you to fear silence. It has conditioned you to seek constant evidence that you matter. Notifications, reactions, shares, messages, tiny digital injections convincing your nervous system that visibility equals existence. But real human value has never operated that way. The strongest oak tree in the forest does not scream while growing. The mountain does not announce its height. And the most disciplined person in any room rarely needs to explain who they are. You can feel it before they speak. That presence is never built publicly first. It is constructed privately, brick by brick, decision by decision. A man becomes respected long before anyone notices him. And that is where the silent architect is born. Not during applause, not during recognition, not during success, but during the invisible moments nobody claps for. The moment you wake up early without posting about it. The moment you study while others consume distractions. The moment you refuse an impulse nobody would have punished you for following. The moment you stay disciplined despite having no witness. Those moments look insignificant when isolated. But that is because most people misunderstand how identity is formed. Your public life is never built in public first. It is manufactured in darkness. Every private action leaves residue on your nervous system. Every repeated decision becomes evidence your mind uses to define who you are. Not who you claim to be. Not who you want others to believe you are. Who you actually are when no reward exists. That distinction changes everything, because eventually life exposes everyone. The confident man who secretly lacks discipline collapses under pressure. The loud entrepreneur who performs success online but avoids deep work becomes fragile when competition intensifies. The person addicted to external approval slowly loses the ability to think independently. And by 2026, this collapse is accelerating faster than most people realize. Look carefully at the world around you. People have become addicted to broadcasting motion instead of creating substance. They announce podcasts before developing ideas worth hearing. They post gym selfies while lacking self-control in every other area of life. They speak about mindset while privately drowning in chaos. And the audience rewards the performance because the audience is trapped in the same cycle. Everyone watching everyone. Nobody building anything real. But beneath all that noise, another class of people is quietly separating themselves. You rarely see them coming. That is why they are dangerous. While everyone else is reacting emotionally to every trend, every outrage cycle, every algorithmic distraction, the silent architect is investing attention differently. He understands something most people never learn. Attention is life force. Where attention goes, identity follows. And the average person has completely lost control over it. Their mind belongs to headlines. Their emotions belong to strangers. Their focus belongs to corporations competing to monetize distraction. They wake up and immediately surrender their mental clarity to endless stimulation before their own thoughts can even fully form. Then they wonder why their ambition feels weak. You cannot build a powerful identity with a fragmented mind. It is impossible. Deep work requires psychological solitude. Discipline requires friction. Transformation requires periods of invisibility. But invisibility terrifies people now because they associate being unseen with being unimportant. That fear is quietly destroying millions of lives. There are people right now who would rather appear successful online than actually become capable in reality. Think about how insane that is. They would rather look disciplined than possess discipline. Rather look wealthy than understand value creation. Rather look intelligent than endure the loneliness required to develop intelligence. Because appearances deliver immediate social reward, reality delays gratification, and most people are neurologically incapable of tolerating delayed gratification anymore. That weakness leaks into every area of life. Relationships become performances. Ambition becomes performance. Morality becomes performance. Even suffering becomes performance. People no longer experience life privately. They package it for consumption while it is still happening. And in doing so, they destroy the very depth that creates meaningful character. Because character is forged internally first. Not publicly. Never publicly. A man alone with his habits is the clearest measurement of his future. Not his words. Not his aesthetics. Not his audience. His habits. That is why the silent architect becomes so difficult to stop once momentum forms. He is not fueled by validation. He is fueled by internal standards. There is a massive difference. Validation-dependent people collapse when ignored. Standard-driven people continue regardless. One requires applause to function. The other treats silence as training. And this is where most viewers will miss the deeper point entirely. The silent architect is not hiding from the world because he lacks confidence. He withdraws strategically because he understands something ancient. Exposure too early weakens construction. A building surrounded by constant interruption is never completed efficiently. The same applies to identity. When you constantly announce your goals, your brain often receives premature emotional satisfaction. You feel rewarded before achieving anything substantial. The performance becomes psychologically interchangeable with progress. That is why so many people remain trapped in cycles of intention without transformation. Talking replaces doing. Announcement replaces execution. Identity becomes fantasy instead of evidence. But the silent architect operates differently. He lets results speak last, not first. And when results finally arrive, they carry unusual weight because they are backed by substance rather than performance. You have felt this before around certain people. They enter a room calmly. No desperation. No need to dominate attention. No frantic need to prove intelligence. Yet somehow the entire atmosphere shifts around them. Why? Because humans instinctively recognize internal congruence. We can sense when somebody has spent years refining themselves privately. Not perfectly, but honestly. Their words carry density because their life has pressure behind it. Their confidence feels stable because it was earned without spectators. Their discipline feels natural because it was repeated in silence long before anyone noticed. That presence cannot be faked indefinitely. And deep down, people crave it because the modern world feels increasingly artificial. Everyone is exhausted by performance. Exhausted by exaggerated personalities. Exhausted by empty confidence. Exhausted by motivational theater disconnected from reality. Which is why quiet competence is becoming rare again. And rare things become valuable. This is the irony nobody talks about. The less obsessed you become with appearing important, the more powerful your presence eventually becomes. Because genuine depth accumulates slowly. Like pressure beneath the earth. Invisible at first, then undeniable. The silent architect understands this process emotionally, not just intellectually. He stops expecting immediate recognition. He stops demanding applause for basic discipline. He stops negotiating with temporary emotions. Instead, he begins constructing identity through repetition so consistent that eventually even his environment has no choice but to respond differently to him. But this process is painful in ways most people cannot tolerate. Because there is a phase where nothing external confirms your growth. No recognition. No visible reward. No proof to others. Only you facing yourself repeatedly. That phase destroys performative people. They cannot survive without external reinforcement. They need witnesses. The silent architect survives because he understands a brutal truth. The person you become in isolation eventually introduces itself publicly without permission. And once you understand that, your relationship with solitude changes permanently. Suddenly silence stops feeling empty. It starts feeling strategic. The early mornings feel different. The repetitions feel different. The refusal to chase distractions feels different. Because now you understand you are not merely completing actions. You are constructing identity, brick by brick, choice by choice, thought by thought, and most importantly, you stop underestimating small decisions. Modern culture glorifies dramatic transformation because dramatic transformation sells attention. But real change rarely arrives dramatically. It arrives through accumulation so subtle that outsiders barely notice until the gap becomes irreversible. That is how empires are built. That is how bodies transform. That is how minds sharpen. That is how reputations form. Slowly, silently, then suddenly. But the world trains you to disrespect slow growth because slow growth cannot be monetized emotionally as easily. People want immediate evidence, immediate success, immediate recognition. Yet nearly every powerful human being in history spent years operating in obscurity before the world acknowledged them. Years, not weeks, not motivational montages, years of invisible refinement, and most people quit before reaching the phase where compound effort becomes visible. That is why the silent architect gains such a disproportionate advantage over time. He understands that obscurity is not punishment. It is preparation. While others panic during invisibility, he uses it. While others chase attention, he sharpens capability. While others perform ambition, he becomes ambitious at a structural level. There is a difference between wanting success and becoming the type of person capable of sustaining it. Most people only pursue the first. The silent architect obsesses over the second. That is why his victories last longer. And this next part matters more than you think. Because eventually, your private life leaks into your public presence whether you intend it or not. Resentment leaks. Weakness leaks. Discipline leaks. Integrity leaks. Self-respect leaks. You cannot permanently separate internal reality from external expression. Sooner or later, the mask cracks under pressure. Which means your unseen habits are already shaping every future interaction you will have. Every conversation, every opportunity, every relationship, every room you enter. You are carrying your private identity into public life whether you realize it or not. And if that realization unsettles you, good. It should. Because most people spend years decorating appearances while neglecting foundations. Then they wonder why everything collapses the moment real pressure arrives. The silent architect builds foundations first. Always first. Even when nobody sees them. Especially when nobody sees them. If this mindset already feels familiar to you, press like on this video. Not for the algorithm. For evidence. Evidence that you are done confusing visibility with value. Comment the phrase, "built in silence," below. Share this with someone still addicted to external approval. And subscribe if you are ready to become harder to manipulate by the modern world. Because what comes next will expose the hidden cost of living for applause. And most people are not prepared to hear it. There is a reason you feel strangely empty after receiving attention you once thought would change your life. The compliment fades. The likes disappear. The applause moves to someone else. And suddenly you are left alone again with the same mind you were trying to escape from in the first place. That is the hidden failure of external validation. It creates emotional spikes without internal construction. Temporary elevation without structural reinforcement. You feel seen for a moment, but you do not actually become stronger. The silent architect understands this early. He realizes that most people are not addicted to success. They are addicted to interruption. Anything that distracts them from confronting themselves becomes valuable. Entertainment, drama, attention, endless scrolling, even fake productivity. Especially fake productivity. Because fake productivity gives the illusion of movement without the psychological discomfort required for actual transformation. And the modern world is built perfectly for this trap. You can spend 12 hours a day surrounded by content related to ambition while remaining completely unchanged as a human being. You can listen to discipline without becoming disciplined. Watch self-improvement without improving. Study wealth without building value. Consume wisdom without developing judgment. This is the disease of passive ambition. And it is spreading quietly. The average person now mistakes intellectual stimulation for execution. Their mind feels active, so they assume progress is occurring. But stimulation and transformation are not the same thing. Transformation costs something, usually comfort, usually ego, usually identity, because real growth forces you to abandon versions of yourself that once felt safe. That is why most people unconsciously resist it. Not because they lack desire. Because they fear what transformation will require them to lose. The silent architect loses publicly appealing illusions on purpose. He stops needing to appear interesting. Stops needing immediate recognition. Stops announcing every insight and intention. And in that silence, something dangerous begins happening internally. His attention starts consolidating. That sentence matters more than it appears. Most people no longer possess consolidated attention. Their focus is shattered across dozens of emotional entry points every single day. Messages, notifications, short videos, outrage cycles, artificial urgency, endless comparison. Their nervous system never fully settles long enough to produce depth. So they remain reactive. And reactive people are easy to control, easy to influence, easy to manipulate, easy to exhaust. But the silent architect slowly becomes difficult to disturb. Not because he lacks emotion. Because he has trained emotional restraint. That distinction is critical. The strongest people are not emotionless. They are emotionally governed. They decide where attention goes instead of surrendering it automatically. And this single ability is becoming one of the rarest forms of power in 2026. Look at modern society honestly. Most people cannot sit alone with their thoughts for 10 minutes without reaching for stimulation. Silence exposes unresolved chaos. Stillness reveals dependency. And dependency terrifies people because it exposes how little control they actually possess over themselves. That is why many individuals stay permanently distracted. Distraction protects fragile identities from examination. The silent architect does the opposite. He examines himself ruthlessly, not emotionally, precisely. He studies his impulses the way a strategist studies enemy movements. Why did that criticism affect me? Why do I seek recognition here? Why do I avoid discomfort there? Why am I negotiating with weakness in private while pretending to be disciplined publicly? These questions are painful because they remove fantasy. But fantasy is expensive. The longer you protect illusion, the more reality punishes you later. Most people delay this confrontation for years. Some for entire lifetimes. They remain surrounded by noise because silence would force honesty. And honesty changes everything. The moment you become brutally honest with yourself, your standards begin shifting automatically. You stop respecting excuses that once sounded convincing. You stop admiring performative confidence. You stop envying people whose lives are built entirely around visibility. Because now you can see beneath the surface. You realize many loud people are deeply fragile internally. That many admired people secretly depend on constant reassurance. That many successful people are psychologically collapsing behind carefully managed images. And suddenly your relationship with public perception changes. You stop craving to be seen everywhere. You start craving substance. This is the exact point where the silent architect separates from the crowd permanently. Not when he becomes successful. When he becomes impossible to seduce with superficial validation. That is the real transformation. Because once external approval loses authority over your nervous system, your decisions become cleaner, sharper, more dangerous. You stop choosing actions based on appearance and start choosing based on long-term structural value. Most people never reach this stage. They continue organizing their lives around emotional reaction. They pursue careers for status, relationships for image, opinions for acceptance, and because their identity depends on external reinforcement, they become psychologically enslaved to public perception. Every criticism destabilizes them. Every comparison weakens them. Every moment of invisibility terrifies them. They are not living. They are managing impressions. But impression management destroys inner clarity. The silent architect understands that every moment spent performing is energy stolen from becoming. That is why he protects his focus aggressively. Not casually, aggressively. Because he knows modern distraction is not accidental. Entire industries now profit from fractured attention. The more emotionally reactive you become, the easier you are to monetize. The more distracted you become, the less likely you are to build independent thought. And independent thought is dangerous to systems built on dependency. So the world constantly encourages stimulation over reflection, reaction over discipline, visibility over depth. But beneath all of that noise, something else is happening quietly. A small percentage of people are withdrawing from the chaos strategically. Not socially isolated, mentally disciplined. They are rediscovering depth while the world worships speed. They are building concentration while the world loses it. They are mastering delayed gratification while the world becomes increasingly impulsive. And over time, this creates an almost unfair advantage. Because concentrated individuals outperform distracted individuals eventually in nearly every environment. Not immediately, eventually. That word matters. The modern mind hates eventual rewards because algorithms have conditioned people to expect immediate emotional return for every action. But life does not reward people immediately most of the time. Life rewards accumulation. That is why disciplined people often appear ordinary at first. Their progress is hidden underground. Then one day everyone calls them exceptional. What observers fail to notice is that the transformation began years earlier in silence. When nobody cared. When nobody believed in them. When no proof existed externally. This is where most people fail the test. Not during difficulty. During obscurity. Because obscurity forces you to discover whether your ambition is genuine or performative. Would you still pursue excellence if nobody witnessed it? Would you still train if no one complimented your body? Would you still study if no one called you intelligent? Would you still build if recognition disappeared entirely? Most people instinctively answer yes. Reality usually exposes a different answer. That is why solitude becomes such a brutal mirror. It reveals your actual relationship with discipline. And the silent architect learns to love that mirror. Not emotionally, strategically. Because every private weakness exposed early can still be corrected before it becomes public consequence later. That perspective alone changes how you experience discomfort. Suddenly failure becomes information. Silence becomes training. Discipline becomes identity instead of temporary motivation. And this next part is critical. The silent architect does not merely avoid distractions. He understands why distractions are attractive in the first place. That psychological awareness gives him leverage over himself. Most people attack symptoms while protecting causes. They try to remove bad habits without examining emotional dependency beneath them. So the cycle repeats endlessly. Temporary discipline, collapse. Temporary discipline, collapse. Because the identity underneath remains unchanged. But the silent architect studies root systems. He notices that many distractions are actually emotional escape mechanisms. Scrolling to avoid anxiety, entertainment to avoid uncertainty, attention seeking to avoid insignificance, constant social engagement to avoid confronting internal emptiness. Once you see this clearly, your habits stop looking random. They start looking revealing. And that realization can either destroy you or evolve you depending on whether you are willing to face it honestly. Most people are not. They would rather protect ego than rebuild identity. But rebuilding identity is exactly what creates power. Not motivational power. Not performative power. Stable power. The kind that remains when circumstances change. The kind that survives failure. The kind that does not disappear when attention leaves the room. That stability is becoming increasingly rare because modern culture rewards emotional volatility. People are trained to react instantly to everything now. Instant outrage, instant opinion, instant exposure, instant validation, no pause, no reflection, no depth. And when a human being loses the ability to pause, they lose the ability to govern themselves consciously. Their impulses take control. Their environment takes control. Public emotion takes control. The silent architect refuses this surrender. He pauses deliberately, observes deliberately, speaks deliberately, acts deliberately. At first this makes him appear slower than others, less visible, less socially rewarded, but over time his precision compounds while others burn themselves out chasing emotional stimulation. And eventually a strange reversal occurs. The people who once appeared dominant begin collapsing internally, while the quiet individual who spent years mastering himself becomes increasingly formidable. You see this in every domain eventually. The loud competitor fades. The disciplined operator endures. The attention addict loses clarity. The focused builder gains leverage. The person obsessed with perception becomes fragile. The person obsessed with substance becomes resilient. And resilience always outlives performance. Always. That is why private victories matter more than public applause. Private victories alter structure. Public applause alters mood. One changes identity. The other changes emotion temporarily. And emotions are unstable foundations for life. Identity is not. This is also why the silent architect becomes increasingly difficult to intimidate. Because intimidation only works effectively on people dependent on external approval. Once you stop needing constant validation, social pressure loses much of its power over you. You become harder to manipulate through shame, harder to bait through comparison, harder to distract through trends. And in a society addicted to emotional reaction, calm self-governance looks almost unnatural. People notice it immediately. They may not understand it, but they feel it, because composure communicates hidden depth. Anyone can appear confident when conditions are favorable. Very few remain internally stable without constant reinforcement. That stability is earned privately, not publicly, always privately, which means your unseen life is not separate from your future influence. It is the source of it. The conversations nobody hears, the standards nobody monitors, the discipline nobody applauds, the decisions nobody validates. Those moments are constructing the person your future will eventually reveal to the world. Whether you realize it or not, you are already building your public reputation through private behavior. Right now, at this exact moment, and most people are building carelessly. They underestimate how much repeated compromise weakens identity over time. One ignored standard becomes two. Two become patterns. Patterns become character. Character becomes destiny. The silent architect understands this chain early enough to interrupt it. That interruption changes the trajectory of his entire life. Not instantly, gradually. But gradual change is still change. In fact, gradual change is usually the only kind that lasts. Which means the question is no longer whether your private life affects your public worth. It already does. The real question is whether you are building yourself intentionally or accidentally. Because both paths compound. One creates internal authority, the other creates hidden fragility. And the frightening part is that the difference often remains invisible until pressure arrives. But pressure always arrives. Remember that, always. Pressure does not create character. It reveals the architecture that was already there. That is why some people become composed during chaos while others collapse publicly the moment life stops cooperating with them. The collapse is never random. It is accumulated weakness finally becoming visible. And most people spend years building invisible weakness without realizing it. Every time they betray their own standards for comfort. Every time they avoid necessary discomfort. Every time they trade long-term respect for short-term emotional relief. A fracture forms internally. Small at first, almost unnoticeable. But fractures compound. The silent architect understands this better than most because he has experienced the cost of self-betrayal personally. Not theoretically, personally. There was a version of him that wanted shortcuts too. A version addicted to distraction. A version hungry for recognition before earning capability. A version that hoped appearance alone could compensate for lack of structure. But eventually reality cornered him the same way reality corners everyone. And reality is merciless toward performance. Because life eventually removes all filters. No caption can protect you from incompetence. No aesthetic can protect you from weakness. No public image can protect you from the consequences of private negligence. At some point, every human being meets themselves fully. Usually during hardship. Usually during isolation. Usually during failure. That encounter changes people permanently. Some retreat deeper into distraction afterward. Others rebuild themselves from the foundation upward. The silent architect chooses the second path. Not because it feels good. Because it becomes unavoidable. He realizes something that most people spend decades avoiding. You cannot build a powerful life on top of a weak relationship with yourself. Eventually the contradiction destroys you internally. That is why many people feel exhausted despite appearing functional externally. They are carrying the psychological weight of divided identity. One version presented publicly, another version known privately, and maintaining that separation drains enormous energy over time. The silent architect ends that division. He stops trying to appear disciplined. He becomes disciplined. He stops trying to look focused. He trains focus. He stops trying to seem intelligent. He studies deeply enough that clarity becomes natural. This sounds simple. It is not. Because authentic self-construction requires the destruction of comforting illusions. And illusions fight back aggressively when threatened. Your ego will negotiate constantly. Tomorrow instead of today, later instead of now, comfort instead of growth, excuses instead of accountability. The mind becomes extraordinarily creative when protecting weakness. That is why discipline is not merely behavioral. It is psychological warfare, against impulse, against self-deception, against internal negotiation. And most people lose this war quietly every day without noticing. Not through dramatic failures, through repeated compromise. One distraction justified, one standard lowered, one promise abandoned. Over time these moments accumulate into identity erosion. The person begins losing trust in themselves subconsciously. And once self-trust deteriorates, ambition weakens automatically. Because deep down, the mind no longer believes its own promises. This is why so many people restart their lives every Monday emotionally. New plans, new motivation, new declarations. But internally nothing changes because the foundation remains unstable. The silent architect understands that self-respect is not generated through intention. It is generated through evidence. Evidence collected privately. You build self-trust by keeping promises nobody else even knows you made. That is why private victories carry extraordinary psychological weight. Every completed discipline session, every resisted distraction, every difficult conversation handled honestly, every moment of restraint instead of impulse. These actions communicate something directly to your nervous system. You can rely on yourself. And once that belief strengthens, your entire presence changes. Not artificially, structurally. You stop speaking with hidden uncertainty. Stop seeking excessive reassurance. Stop needing endless external confirmation. Because now your confidence is tied to evidence instead of emotion. That distinction separates grounded individuals from fragile performers. Fragile performers require constant reinforcement because internally they know the foundation is unstable. Grounded individuals move differently because their identity has already survived private testing. That private testing matters more than public success ever will. Success can be accidental. Virality can be accidental. Attention can be accidental. Character cannot. Character is constructed intentionally through repeated alignment between values and behavior. And the terrifying part is that most people are no longer aligned internally at all. They say discipline matters while feeding distraction constantly. They say they value truth while avoiding honest self-examination. They say they want greatness while organizing daily life around comfort. Then they wonder why they feel powerless. Powerlessness often comes from internal contradiction. The silent architect eliminates contradiction slowly, painfully, but deliberately. That is why his presence eventually feels different. Not louder, cleaner. There is less internal conflict leaking through his behavior. Less performance. Less desperation. Less unconscious need for approval. You can sense when somebody has stopped outsourcing their worth to public opinion. They become calmer under observation. Less reactive during criticism. More precise with speech. More selective with attention. Because their identity is no longer floating on the unstable surface of social validation. It has roots now. Deep roots. And roots matter during storms. This is where many people misunderstand confidence completely. They think confidence comes from winning constantly. It does not. Real confidence comes from surviving honest confrontation with yourself repeatedly. That process creates emotional stability. You stop fearing self-awareness because you have already faced uncomfortable truths privately. Most people avoid these truths aggressively. Not because they are weak beyond repair. Because honesty threatens the identity they have built around appearances. But appearances cannot sustain a human being internally forever. Eventually exhaustion appears. Anxiety appears. Meaninglessness appears. Because external performance without internal alignment creates psychological emptiness. And no amount of attention fills that emptiness permanently. That is why some highly visible people still feel deeply lost. They built image before foundation. Visibility before structure. Attention before identity. The silent architect reverses the order. Identity first. Structure first. Attention last. Sometimes never. And ironically, that is often exactly why attention eventually finds him anyway. Because substance radiates differently than performance. Humans recognize authenticity instinctively even if they cannot explain it logically. We trust people who appear internally congruent. People whose words match behavior. People whose energy feels settled rather than performative. That trust becomes influence naturally. Not forced, not manufactured, earned. And earned influence is far more durable than attention purchased through spectacle. The modern world confuses these constantly. It rewards spectacle immediately, but spectacle fades rapidly because it depends on novelty. Substance compounds because it depends on depth. One burns quickly, the other endures pressure. This is why the silent architect often appears invisible early in life. Depth develops quietly. There are no dramatic signals while roots are forming underground. And underground work is lonely. That loneliness breaks many people. Not because they lack capability. Because they interpret invisibility as failure. They think if nobody notices them yet, nothing meaningful is happening. So they abandon the process too early. They return to performance because performance provides immediate emotional feedback. But immediate feedback is not always evidence of meaningful progress. Sometimes it is evidence of shallow reward systems. The silent architect learns to detach from immediate emotional reinforcement. That skill changes everything, because now he can continue building during seasons where no visible reward exists. That ability alone creates enormous long-term advantage. Most people only operate effectively when emotionally stimulated. The silent architect operates through principle, through systems, through standards, which means his discipline survives emotional fluctuation. And emotional fluctuation destroys more lives than lack of talent ever will. Talent without structure becomes inconsistency. Intelligence without discipline becomes wasted potential. Ambition without restraint becomes self-destruction. The silent architect understands that restraint itself is power. Not repression. Restraint. The ability to govern impulse consciously instead of obeying every emotional command immediately. That governance affects every domain of life eventually. Money, relationships, health, reputation, leadership, everything. Because every outcome is shaped partly by repeated decisions under emotional pressure. And if you cannot govern yourself privately, eventually life exposes that weakness publicly. Always. This is why hidden habits matter more than public declarations. Because habits determine behavioral patterns automatically when pressure intensifies. Under stress, people rarely rise to ideals. They fall to conditioning. The silent architect conditions himself intentionally. That sentence alone should disturb you slightly. Because whether intentional or accidental, you are conditioning yourself every single day already. Every repeated action trains identity. Every repeated thought strengthens pathways. Every compromise teaches the mind what standards are acceptable. The question is not whether conditioning is occurring. The question is whether it is serving your future or sabotaging it. Most people sabotage themselves gradually while believing they are merely relaxing or taking breaks. But repeated indulgence reshapes identity quietly. Repeated distraction weakens concentration. Repeated avoidance weakens courage. Repeated comparison weakens self-respect. And these effects accumulate invisibly until one day the person no longer recognizes who they have become. That transformation rarely happens dramatically. It happens through unnoticed repetition. The silent architect uses the same principle intentionally in reverse. He understands that greatness is usually mundane up close. Repetition, consistency, restraint, focus, again, again, again. Not glamorous, not cinematic, but devastatingly effective over time. And eventually something extraordinary begins happening. The individual who once felt fragmented starts becoming internally unified. Thoughts align with actions. Values align with behavior. Promises align with execution. That alignment creates unusual psychological strength because energy is no longer being wasted maintaining contradiction. Everything begins moving in the same direction. That is when momentum becomes dangerous. Because now discipline no longer feels forced constantly. It begins feeling natural. Identity has shifted. The person is no longer trying to perform excellence occasionally. They have reorganized themselves around it structurally. Most people never experience this shift because they quit during the invisible phase. They stop too early, seek validation too early, expose goals too early, reward themselves too early, and in doing so, they interrupt the deeper identity reconstruction that only solitude and repetition can create. The silent architect protects that reconstruction process fiercely. He understands that fragile things require privacy while developing. A seed underground looks insignificant until it breaks concrete years later. Human transformation operates similarly. The strongest identities are usually built quietly first. And when they finally emerge publicly, outsiders call it sudden. Nothing about it was sudden. You simply were not there during construction. Remember that the next time you compare your beginning to someone else's visible outcome, you are comparing your current chapter to years of invisible labor you never witnessed. And that comparison will poison you if you are not careful. Because envy distracts attention outward while power is built inward. The silent architect never wastes excessive energy monitoring other people's timelines. He is too occupied constructing his own foundation. And that foundation is becoming heavier every day. He can feel it, even before anyone else notices. Especially before anyone else notices. One day, people will call your discipline natural. They will look at your composure, your restraint, your clarity, your results, and assume you were simply born different. They will never see the nights you fought your own mind in silence. They will never see the impulses you buried before they became addictions. They will never see the loneliness you endured while everyone else chased distraction together. And they will definitely never see how many times you nearly gave up privately before rebuilding yourself again without witnesses. That is the final irony of the silent architect. The world only notices the finished structure. Never the construction. But the construction is everything. Because the unseen years determine the visible years. Always. This is what modern culture refuses to teach people honestly. Public outcomes are usually delayed echoes of private behavior. What the world eventually calls confidence was once repetition. What the world eventually calls wisdom was once isolation. What the world eventually calls influence was once invisibility. Nothing meaningful appears instantly. Not real strength. Not real clarity. Not real authority. Those things are earned slowly through friction most people spend their lives avoiding. And avoidance has consequences. Severe ones. A person who constantly escapes discomfort eventually becomes fragile without realizing it. Their emotional tolerance shrinks. Their focus weakens. Their ability to endure uncertainty collapses. Then one ordinary hardship arrives and suddenly they feel overwhelmed by life itself. Not because life became impossible. Because they never trained themselves internally. The silent architect trains continuously. Even when life is calm. Especially when life is calm. Because he understands a truth most people only learn after suffering humiliates them publicly. Preparation is easier than repair. It is easier to discipline impulses early than rebuild identity after years of self-destruction. Easier to maintain standards than recover self-respect after repeatedly betraying yourself. Easier to build strength quietly than survive collapse loudly. But modern society rarely rewards preparation emotionally. It rewards reaction. People wait until chaos arrives before attempting self-control. They wait until relationships collapse before learning communication. Wait until health deteriorates before valuing discipline. Wait until life exposes weakness publicly before confronting private habits honestly. The silent architect refuses delayed awareness. He studies consequences before they arrive. That alone gives him extraordinary leverage over his future. Because foresight is power. And foresight is becoming increasingly rare in a world addicted to immediacy. Most people now think only in emotional proximity. What feels good now? What gains approval now? What reduces discomfort now? But short-term thinking quietly destroys long-term identity. Every repeated decision shapes future capacity. The foods you normalize. The thoughts you entertain. The standards you tolerate. The people you surround yourself with. The distractions you repeatedly justify. All of it compounds. Human beings are accumulation machines whether they realize it or not. The silent architect becomes dangerous the moment he fully understands this principle. Because now every private action carries meaning. Every decision becomes construction material. And once you begin viewing life through this lens, your standards rise automatically. Not from ego, from awareness. You stop casually poisoning your focus. Stop negotiating with habits that weaken self-respect. Stop tolerating environments that drain ambition. Because now you understand something terrifying. Your future identity is being built continuously by your present behavior. Not someday. Now. At this exact moment. That realization changes how you walk through ordinary days. Suddenly mornings matter more. Conversations matter more. Attention matters more. Because repetition creates architecture. And architecture determines resilience. That is why some people remain stable during pressure while others fracture instantly. The fracture existed long before the pressure arrived. Pressure simply exposed it publicly. The silent architect knows this, so he stops obsessing over appearances entirely. He becomes obsessed with alignment. Internal alignment. Behavior aligned with values. Speech aligned with reality. Standards aligned with action. Because alignment creates peace that external validation never can. This peace is not softness. It is strength without inner conflict. A calmness built through self-respect. And self-respect is impossible to fake internally. You either know you are disciplined or you do not. Know you are honest or you do not. Know you can rely on yourself or you do not. The mind always knows. That is why people can fool audiences easier than they can fool themselves. And eventually the tension of living dishonestly becomes unbearable. The silent architect removes this tension gradually through congruence. He says less, executes more, promises less, builds more, displays less, develops more. At first this lifestyle appears almost invisible from the outside. Then years pass, and the gap becomes impossible to ignore. The distracted person becomes emotionally scattered. The disciplined person becomes grounded. The attention addict becomes dependent on relevance. The silent architect becomes independent from it. That independence is where true authority begins. Because authority is not loudness. It is stability. People trust stability instinctively. They trust the person who remains composed during uncertainty. The person who does not panic emotionally every time circumstances shift. The person whose identity is not controlled by public opinion. And that level of internal steadiness cannot be purchased. It cannot be performed indefinitely. It must be built, slowly, silently, one private victory at a time. That is the deeper meaning behind everything you have heard in this video. Private victories are not small. They are foundational. The workout nobody saw. The temptation resisted quietly. The difficult truth admitted internally. The discipline maintained despite exhaustion. The focus preserved despite distraction. Those moments appear invisible externally. But internally they are reshaping your nervous system, your standards, your identity, and eventually your destiny itself. The world sees outcomes last. You experience construction first. Never forget that, because there will be periods where your growth feels invisible even to you. Periods where discipline feels repetitive. Where progress feels slow. Where nobody notices the effort. Those are the exact moments where most people abandon the process. The silent architect does not. He understands that invisibility is often the incubation phase of transformation. A blade is forged in fire before it ever cuts cleanly. A building is reinforced underground before it rises above the skyline. A disciplined human being is constructed privately before presence alone begins affecting rooms publicly. That process cannot be rushed. And trying to rush it usually destroys it. This is another reason the silent architect avoids excessive exposure during development. He protects momentum from interruption. Protects focus from unnecessary comparison. Protects identity from premature validation. Because premature validation weakens hunger. The moment people start rewarding you for becoming instead of being, complacency begins whispering. That whisper destroys more potential than failure ever will. The silent architect stays hungry by staying internally focused. Not obsessed with proving himself constantly. Obsessed with refining himself continuously. That distinction separates builders from performers. Performers require audiences. Builders require standards. And standards outlive audiences every single time. One day the algorithm changes. Trends disappear. Public attention moves elsewhere. The crowd forgets names it once celebrated endlessly. But disciplined identity survives those shifts. Because it was never dependent on temporary attention to begin with. That is why some people remain powerful regardless of environment. They built themselves at the root level. The world can remove applause from them without removing their structure. Can remove visibility without removing their discipline. Can remove recognition without removing their clarity. That is real power. Not dominance over others. Governance over self. And governance over self changes how the world experiences you. Your words become cleaner because they are not inflated by insecurity. Your decisions become sharper because they are not distorted by emotional dependency. Your presence becomes calmer because there is less contradiction inside you. People notice this immediately even when they cannot explain it. Because congruence radiates. Humans instinctively feel when someone has survived private battles honestly. That energy cannot be copied through aesthetics or performance. It must be earned through friction, through sacrifice, through repeated moments where nobody would have known if you chose weakness instead. But you chose discipline anyway. That choice matters more than you think. Every single time. Because every private decision casts a vote for the person you are becoming. Weakness repeated becomes identity. Discipline repeated becomes identity too. The silent architect never forgets this. That is why he treats ordinary days seriously. Because ordinary days become entire lives eventually. And most lives are lost through small repeated compromises, not dramatic disasters. One distracted hour becomes years of fragmented attention. One tolerated weakness becomes permanent self-negotiation. One abandoned standard becomes a pattern of self-betrayal. Patterns become character. Character becomes fate. This is why your private victories define your public worth. Not symbolically, literally. Your unseen life is shaping your future presence already. The world you enter tomorrow will experience the person you build tonight. So build carefully. Build honestly. Build without needing applause every step of the way. Because the strongest identities are never rushed into existence publicly. They are constructed in silence until reality itself begins introducing them to the world automatically. And when that moment arrives, you will not need to announce your transformation. People will feel it before you speak. If this video exposed something inside you that you have been avoiding, subscribe now. Not for entertainment, for alignment. Like the video if you are done mistaking attention for value. Comment the phrase, Silent Architect, below if you are choosing discipline over performance from this point forward. And send this to someone still building their entire identity around visibility. Then continue immediately to the next lesson on this channel. Do not break the chain now. Because once a person learns how to govern themselves privately, the modern world becomes far less capable of controlling them publicly. And that changes everything.